Thank you for sharing your lunch hour with me. Time, the most valuable non-renewable resource we have. So I genuinely appreciate that you're sharing time with me. As the bio there explained, what we're going to go over today is that participant-led engagement. How do we effectively support folks in a community-based model, that recovery-oriented system of care model? That's participant-led. So I want to start with a very basic thing that a lot of the times I've noticed in the work that we've done. So what I'm going to be sharing here is quantitative and qualitative data from the thousands of participants that we've had experience our training programs. Now, our training programs run across Western Canada, and in those training programs, we are working with mental health professionals. We're working with criminal justice, medical, educational, but we're also working with a number of different frontline staff and then participants in their own recovery, right? So we also work with community members, so a wide range of folks coming through these trainings. So this information that I'm presenting to you is from a very wide peer-led group that supports what I'm about to share. So I find it to be pretty important that way, because it's not just one lane. It's kind of the boiled down version of a lot of different perspectives. So I want to start with this one statement. The space should be safe for the participant and supportive of their needs. Now, that sounds pretty basic, but honestly, it rarely happens. So if we want engagement, if we want trust, if we want retention, it has to start with safety. So what tends to happen is we run around like telemarketers. The space is safe, completely private and confidential. This is a safe space, completely private and confidential. This is a safe space. This is a safe space. This is a safe space. And we say it so many times throughout our day and in front of so many participants that it becomes jargon, right? And so we're telling somebody what safety is. And in that moment, we're breaking that opportunity for trust, power, choice, right? So when we're telling someone what safety is, we might not recognize that this space actually doesn't feel safe for this person in this moment. In our space, generally they're set up for ourselves. We've got our desk where we want it to be. We've, closest to the door in case we have to whatever. We, have our organizational lines and jargon and slogans all up, but we don't recognize that, even something like a logo or a brand of a sports team, right? So if I'm wearing a cap and I'm telling you that this is a safe space, maybe that's the same brand or same team that the person was wearing when they victimized this person, right? When they hurt this person. We work with folks across the board. We've had so many different examples. One of the examples that brings this point home quite strong is where we had folks that were working in the foster agency sector. And so when they're they work predominantly, with kiddos that have had a lot of conflicts and high levels of sexual abuse in those situations. So reading bedtime stories meant that they would not do them in the bedroom. They would read bedtime stories in the living room, bright lighting. And so the father's reading the bedtime story to the little girl. And, as safe as they think that they've made this space possible. And the little girl says, but where's the fuzzy blanket so we can start doing right? And so that fuzzy blanket on the couch for us, means warmth, means comfort, means safety, but we don't know what that could have been and if it was a weapon of abuse for the person sitting there. And further to that, this person's looking at you, looking at the blanket, looking at you, looking at the blanket, and they might come across disengaged. And so we go to our case notes and we write participant disengaged, participant not ready. And so they're then blamed for the fact that this space didn't feel safe. And so the solution to that, the easy, most practical way to solve all of this is just simply asking, is this space safe for you? Not, this is a safe space, completely private and confidential. Is this space comfortable for you? Is this space safe for you? Is there anything in this environment that you find upsetting? Is there anything in this environment that we could pivot, that we could shift, that we could adjust? And, there are going to be things in our environment that maybe we absolutely cannot change, right? So we're not going to just get out a bucket of paint and start, doing demolitions every time we have a new participant. But in those must-haves and the things that we cannot shift, naming them, creating the space for this person, again, participant-led, for them to share what that baseball team has done to them, or the feelings they have around that, or that artwork in the background, or, is God written 9 times behind you in your steps, and or political slogans, whatever it is. But creating that space where this person can come in and share some of their experience, because we do not get to declare safety on behalf of someone else. And when we do declare safety for somebody else and we get it wrong, we really breach trust and break that relationship. So a space does not become safe because we called it safe. Safety is an experience, and people are going to forget everything you said. They're going to forget everything you did over time, but they will always, always, always remember how you made them feel. And so we want that feeling, right? We want people to tell us how they feel. So that safety is not going to come in through curriculum. It's not going to come in through the schedule. It's not going to come in through your policy binders, or, even you having good intentions. You might be doing all of these things with the best intentions. So it all is going to come in and how it's landing for that person inside that specific room. So a room can be private and still feel unsafe, right? Door closed, door open. A facilitator can be kind as they are, and still, because of the holding of power, still feel unsafe for this person. A group can feel safe to some and completely exposed to others. So this can cause this person to disengage, right? So today, when I talk about participant-centered programming, I do not want us to think about what we teach necessarily. I want us to think about what participants are experiencing while we're teaching, right? So that participant-centered approach is, instead of what I'm doing, how is it landing? What I'm saying, how are they hearing this? What my intentions were, what actually occurred because of it, right? So we want to move more into that language and to that thought process, because strong recovery programming is not about content. It is about giving people power. It is about giving people choice, and it's about giving people community, because power and choice and community, from what I've seen in the work that I do, are kind of that trifecta for getting people away from just a limited lens of sobriety and moving into more of an expansive lens of recovery. So there's a huge difference between attendance and engagement. We need to remember that just because somebody's there does not mean that they're engaged. And there's a big difference between compliance and investment. We have to do so much more as care providers to force compliance, and have to do so much less when our community members are invested in the outcome, right? So there's a difference in saying, this is a safe space, and simply asking, is this space safe for you? And we're not going to do it with a model. We're not going to do it with a theory. We're going to do it in asking those questions and creating that room for this person. So let's start by going over, we're going to go over, participant engagement, trust, and retention. We're going to go over group culture, connection, and belonging. We'll talk about structure and consistency and intentional group design, and how that can influence your engagement with your participants. And then how physical and emotional environments will affect participation, okay? So all the way, we'll have some practical strategies that you can use to deliver in your own programming. So what actually drives engagement, trust, and retention? The difference between I'm being told to do this and I'm a part of building this. Okay, so there is a huge shift there. If you're telling somebody what to do, you're going to go here, you're going to go here, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, your roommates, and there's no opportunity for power or choice, you are going to lose the amount of engagement that this participant is going to have, right? So participants engage when programming gives them power, choice, clarity, community, and meaningful participation. They disengage when programming feels like something is being done to them, around them, or without them. And a lot of the times, unhelpful help is doing that. It's doing things without any, engagement from the participant, without any choice, without any say. So what drives engagement, like I said, power and choice. Compliance is not the same thing as investment, like I said earlier. So we want to make sure that choice is given to our participants. Choice can be as simple as, where would you like to sit? Okay, so in all of my spaces, when I work with folks, I have 3 chairs. And as they enter the room, I ask, where would you like to sit? They will choose their seat. Then I will ask, where would you like me to sit? They tell me where to sit. Power, choice, power, choice, power, choice. Are you okay if Would you be willing to? Are you able to? Is now the right time? Did I hear you correctly? When all of these different cues, these different opportunities for power choice that we can embed in our conversation, in our conversational assessments, in the engagement that we have with this participant is going to, again, give them power and choice, meaning power, the ability to affect change, powerlessness, the inability to affect change, right? So sometimes care can come in and it says, you're going to eat food here, you've got your roommate here, classes are here, you're going to meet your case manager here, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. And what that person is left with is a whole bunch of I have tos. And there's no I get tos or I chose tos, right? So even if we look at scheduling with case managers, right? So a lot of the times here, you're going to meet your case manager Monday morning at 8 a.m. every week, bang, right? And so this participant has no choice, and so they have to. And so that relationship is built on compliance. It's not built on engagement. You know, we obviously cannot create open-ended 24/7 availability with our participants when we're working in facilities, but can we get creative and create structures that they can at least have some choice in it, right? So would you prefer to meet Monday morning at 8 or Thursday at 1, right? So they have an afternoon and evening choice. Then when they show up for their appointment, yeah, you made it to the appointment that you selected. That's awesome. I'm so glad you're here. There is accountability, there's confidence building, there's power, you know, the ability to affect change. In the event that they don't show up for their appointment, now you've got that system that you can still work for and then ask this person, okay, so I noticed that you didn't make the appointment that you selected at the time that you selected. Did something come up this week that got in the way of that? And so this person's going to look you in the eye and understand that they did choose this, and maybe something did happen, right? There's a lot of life happening a lot of times for our participants. So before it goes into a punitive approach and a compliance-driven, have to force you to approach, we can uncover something else that might be necessary to speak on. And then they might say, actually, I realize Thursdays don't work for me because of this thing I didn't think about yet. Okay, perfect. Now we can start finding spaces through power and choice that are actually going to be more sustainable long-term for this participant, and then cause us less frustration and burnout and compassion fatigue on our end, because we're actually working towards systems that have structure of success versus structure of compliance, because then it's I have to force you every single time, every single week to be here on time, and if you're not, da 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 da. So it creates ownership, and then ownership creates that investment, and then investment creates retention. So the program may accidentally also, when we start eliminating power, it will recreate the same powerlessness many people are trying to recover from. So we're actually working against this thing that we're trying to achieve, right? Because we're stripping this person's power all down to nothing. And so we're making all the decisions for this person. They're not actually learning anything. We're just pausing or postponing pain. So when we're looking at power and choice, we want to be mindful of where to use our power and where to allow for more choice, right? So we can ask for this person, if we're looking at trying to get engagement out of them, would you rather talk about this? Would you rather write about this? Would you rather walk while we talk? Would you rather pause? Should we start somewhere else? Right? When we are asking this person these questions, they're then in the driver's seat. So we are walking alongside them in a partnership versus forcing them to go places, right? And so in giving this person the space to dialogue things in their own way, then they are going to participate to the level that we're hoping for, but they can engage in their own terms. So we're getting the same result. We're just getting less resistance along the way. So when we look at trust, trust is built in clear purpose. Participants need to know why they're doing something. And I think, again, in care, unhelpful help, all kind of stops at the what. We need to go bigger than the what. So why? Why is this thing important? Why is this policy here? Why is this safety mechanism in place? Why has this happened? Why has this shift taken place? Where, when, who, right? Go much bigger than just the what. Because people, we're natural storytellers. We've evolved for story. It's in our survival blueprint. Snake is poisonous, avoid it at all costs. When the clouds do that, you need to start finding shelter. At this point in the year, you need to start harvesting food. The groups, the communities of people that were able to share stories with each other survived and procreated, and that's how all of us folks are made today, right? So people will tell story as a biological response to things. So if you give somebody the what, as in, the beginning or the middle or the end, and you don't give them all three components, they will replace each component with their own perception and fear. So in the absence of fact, it will always be replaced with perception and fear. And so a lot of the times we're working against that system of what. The person knows what, but they think, oh, well, they did this because they believe in us, or they did this because they're taking this away, or they did this because of that. When actually we were trying to be helpful, but we didn't spend enough time on the why, so the person misses the intentionality of whatever the exercise was in the first place. And so activities need to be introduced. Anything that we're going to bring in, we want to tell somebody why. So if you give somebody an activity and you don't explain the purpose, it could feel random for folks. It could feel childish. It could feel forced. It could feel exploitive or performative, right? So when we explain the why to people, then they can connect the activity to their own recovery. When we're looking at retention, we want to make sure that we add pockets of movement and change in location. Okay, so folks in early recovery, there is going to be cognitive, things going on. There's going to be physical things going on. And so the expectation of somebody to be able to digest, especially in the world that we live in now with this distractibility, everybody's, so we want to make sure that we create breaks and spaces and disrupt things through movement. So this can show up in group exercises. This can show up in one-on-ones, right? I'm sure for most of us in the room, we've been in spaces in a vehicle where you're having a really, beautiful conversation with somebody, but you're not actually looking, face to face. You're kind of looking out the window and you're both riding sidecar, and it made that conversation easier. So if we're looking at that setup of 3 chairs, maybe sometimes we sit directly across from somebody. Maybe alternatively, we sit kind of side by each to make this conversation more accessible for this person. And so when we're looking at group activities or classroom setting, breaking people up into different groups, breaking people up into different versions of this space. So maybe we present at this side of the room and we're going to lecture in this part of the room, and we're going to move over here and do a discussion all together in a circle over here. But adding those changes to the environment is going to add to this person's availability for retention. We also want to create breakouts and peer-led exercises. This is one of the biggest things that I think might be missed in care models, is the availability for the participants to teach back to themselves. So lecture, skill, knowledge-based, theory, concept, whatever, that's great information. Let's present it. But now let's make sure it's retained through either a provocative discussion that happens in real time with real world issues, a teach back moment where these folks work in small groups. It's going to build the collaborative energy in the community. It's also going to help them develop as leaders in the community. It's going to help with confidence building, having to publicly speak. It's going to give folks much more than just sitting and listening to dialogue. And we don't understand actually how much of the retention is happening then if somebody's just observing it versus practicing it and performing it, right? So we want to also set immediate and follow retention exercises for a lot of our folks that are coming into our care. They might be in a scarcity mindset, right? If you've been in a lot of crisis or trauma response, and particularly in folks that are unhoused, you have to be very highly attuned to your immediate environment. You are wanting to know safe, unsafe, where is the next emergency? Where's the exits? How do I flee? How do I navigate this exact moment, right? You're not thinking extreme levels out. You're not, that would be like walking up to somebody who's unhoused and asking them what their retirement savings plan is like. It's not, what are you thinking? This person's worried about food, shelter, and safety in this immediate moment. So we want to capture that immediacy, and we want to then bridge it to, where they're taking this beyond this classroom. So, a simple question you could ask at the end of a lecture or a heavy topic is, what was the biggest thing you learned? Or what was the most important thing, or the thing that landed? One specific question, and have every person in the room just share one sentence on it. Right? And then you can create those follow-up moments where the next day we come back. And so, hey, we're going to circle back to this thing, this place, this time, this lecture, and see how it's landed for folks. And we can ask that through, asking for reflections, asking for insights, or asking if anybody has any questions that have bubbled up since that lecture. And really hone back in on that dialogue so that immediate and that follow-up retention is possible, not just in one ear, out the other. So we want to also think about follow-up retention in homework practices, right? So journaling, prompts, peer check-ins, those can be really effective. So prompts are where you start with, the first part of a sentence, give them the first 1/3, and then they finish it. So today, speaking about honesty made me think of a time when blah, 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 right? The family system that I didn't know that was getting in the way of my recovery is, or whatever. Like we start creating all of these prompts for folks to fill in, have that part of the takeaway process. Journal, right? In our programming, we could have journaling as part of it, not journal, dear diary, today Bobby and I, like it doesn't have to be that. It can be structured in a way that folks will then be able to retain what's happening. They will have a playbook for every day that they've been at your facility. So learning should not end when the facilitator stops speaking, is basically what I'm trying to say here. So, when we look at the role of group culture, connection, and belonging in supporting recovery outcomes, group culture is everything. Culture always wins. Culture will supersede everything. So if the culture is built on recovery, it will pull people towards recovery. If the culture is built on anything else, it will pull people away off into that, right? So group culture tells whether a person can be honest, if they're going to be safe being new there, if they're allowed to struggle, if they're allowed to disagree, if they're allowed to be their awkward self, it's huge. Culture is everything. So as much as your skill building is going to be a focus, your cultural awareness needs to be a focus. And when we think about culture, please do not just limit that down to skin color. Culture is everything. Culture is whether this person is, more urban or rural. Culture is age demographic. Culture is sexuality, gender expression, time and space. Culture is, everybody has their own combination of cultural components that make them all up. And so what we want is to have a culture of community, where we are allowed to express our differences and learn from them, and that we understand that the sweet spot is the middle between what you think and what I think. That space in there, right? So many participants arrive with histories of rejection, shame, judgment, right? They're in survival. They may be institutionalized. Family may have been ruptured right from the gate. And so when we're talking about trust building as well, we want to make sure that we think about trust rebuilding, because sometimes we forget that this person is coming in not even at neutral. They're coming in at negative trust. Systems before them have harmed them, maybe parents before them, guardians, authority, friends, whatever. All of the spaces that they should have been able to trust might have harmed this person. So when they're sitting across from you and you're expecting them to just trust you because you're you and you're amazing, that's wildly unfair. This person is set to have a negative trust allocation, okay? So when we're creating cultures of community, the community is helping to rebuild trust alongside us, because the community becomes a mechanism that also says you yourself you, this organization, you, the program, are safe here because we're all saying it. And again, because we're a social mammal, we're a pack mammal, we follow the group. We are a part of community, right? In the absence of belonging, there will always be pain and suffering. We are hardwired for connection. And so whatever that community says, if it says your staff can't be trusted, if it says your staff are hypocrites, if it says your staff are only here for a paycheck, you're not going to get engagement. You're not going to get any of the things that you're looking for. So they're scanning the room for evidence. Like I said, highly attuned, highly attuned to their environment. Folks that have gone through trauma and crisis and chaos have had to build that skill set very in depth. So they're looking around, good, bad, unsafe, safe at all times, and looking for cues, right? So great way to kind of help navigate safety is through working agreements, right? It's community building agreements. Yes, folks come in and we go over policy and we go over rules and we go over all of that, but what about community agreements, right? So those show up in how the group is going to function. They can introduce confidentiality, respect, curiosity, right? They're going to talk about how we disagree, because we're not all going to agree all the time. So let's talk about that up front. How do we disagree? Do we have a flag system where we can raise a flag once a day and say, absolutely not, don't believe this, this is BS, right? How do we pause? How do we have these moments where instead of it being interpreted as somebody being told to shut up or somebody telling somebody else to shut up, we have this mechanism that's a safe word that says, hey, we need a pause, time out, right? If you look at any sporting event, a whistle gets blown, people just follow suit because it's identified ahead of time. And so with these working agreements, we want to be able to establish how this community with leadership and the peers, everybody all together, how we can navigate all of these things ahead of time. Again, an emergency evacuation plan, if you will. We don't wait until the building lights on fire to start planning how to get out. You know, oh, would one of you like to be the secretary? Oh, who should take notes? Oh, how long should this meeting go for? The smoke's billowing in the room. That's ridiculous. But when it comes to personal relationships, we do that over and over and over again. We wait until there's conflict. We wait until there's a blowout, and then we try to navigate out of it. If we can create these working agreements, these safe words, these indicators, green light, red light, right? But also the yellow lights. We tend to think of, green light, red light, go, stop. But the most important light in any intersection is actually the yellow. Because without the yellow light, we would be smashing into each other all day, every day. And so what are your yellow light mechanisms? When are we getting close to conflict? When is it about to get escalated? How far? Also, in important intersections, those yellow lights are even longer. So we want to set a 40, a 30, a 10, we want to set those yard markers so that this person doesn't have to go into conflict and then resolution. Maybe we can kind of slow it down before we get there. So naming discomfort. So what's the word we're going to use when I'm not fit for human consumption? Because some of this stuff is going to be quite prickly. So do we give a community word? Example, timeout or I'm flooded, right? So that at any point somebody can blow the whistle and they're cared for in a way that is given to them as a permission slip. Because without that permission slip, this person might not be able to talk about how they feel, and then they're going to rebel or they're going to react in a way that's going to escalate the situation. And so conflict will happen in groups because humans are here. So we want to name that. We want to normalize conflict. It doesn't have to be this big deal. It doesn't have to be this huge life-altering event, because for some of our participants, conflict resolution might only have been understood as a smack across the face or abandonment. They might have never in their life been modeled what conflict resolution could look like, or what feedback could look like, or what de-escalation looks like. And so when we create these mechanisms ahead of time and we name it and we normalize it and we don't make it this big taboo that gets hidden in the background and whispered behind people's back, then the pressure comes down, the community can respond in a better way. And because we're pack mammals, if we're given the self-correction mechanism, we follow it, and then it just becomes a mechanism that is followed and a pattern of behavior that's repeated. Okay. Connection and belonging. So arriving in a community can be extremely overwhelming, and that peer-led welcome practices create safety, connection, and belonging in a way that is going to shape ongoing retention and ongoing trust. That first day, that first welcome, those simple human gestures, right? Is this person just getting diagnostic care where they're coming in and it's checkpoint, checkpoint, checkpoint? Or are they getting met with another human being that understands what this first day feels like? And they're giving them a high five or a handshake or a welcome, a peer that's going to be able to say to them, I get it. This is scary. And yes, this is awesome and life-changing on one hand, but also awful and terrifying on the other. That dichotomy of having both happening, right? And so, from the outside, a high five might look small, but for someone entering a recovery program, it could be huge. Hi, glad you're here. Yeah, fist pump, whatever, right? So those moments, if you look at our biology, are actually moments that help create serotonin and oxytocin, which is the loop we want anyway, right? So it says to the folks that we're working with, you're not just being processed. Someone has noticed that you as a human being have arrived and that you're already inside this community, that you're already here. You don't have to work from the outside in. You're here now. And so in that here now inside the community, there's a much bigger space for safety and trust. So creating practical peer-led groups, right? Peer-led welcome groups. This is also going to reinforce serotonin and the leadership chemical that we want in our participants. So whatever your programming schedule is, create your bookmarks, your chapters. So guy day one or person, participant meets day one person with somebody that's been here for 30 days and they spend a week together. And then after that week, this person now starts working with this person. And then the person at 30 days is going to work with person at 90 days, and person at 90 days gets person at 6 months. Continue to leapfrog that system across so that people can learn from each other, but they're not just learning from each other. They're now given an opportunity to teach back all the things they've learned, which again is going to help for retention and engagement and a sense of being valued, right? So we want folks to feel valued enough to engage. We want them to feel connected enough so that they collaborate, and we need them to feel safe enough so that they're willing to be honest. Because if they're not collaborating, if they're not engaging, and they're not honest, we can't care for them anyway. So this rotating peer welcome group is not to clinically orient folks, right? We still have our staff models that take care of the clinical care. This is the relational piece. This is the community piece. It's to humanize the arrival. So greeting newcomers explains what's helped them in the first few days, right? There's all of these underground rules of, coffee gate. In any treatment center, oh my God, coffee gate, right? If coffee's made wrong, or you took the last cup of coffee and you didn't replace it, or if you're taking too much sugar, these little nuances that are going to make somebody feel a part of instead of outside of the mechanism, okay? And also normalizing nerves, that it's okay that you feel this scared or this frustrated or that you still want to go back and use drugs right now. Of course you do. This is day one. It's terrifying. And drugs were the solution. So I'm with you, man, but wait a week. Because again, in creating these incremental shifts, you're creating a reality for somebody that they can buy into, that they can accept. If you put Buddy on day one with Buddy that's got 3 years, you can't imagine what 3 years feels like. I can't imagine. I'm on day one and I'm struggling to breathe. But 1 week, okay, maybe I can believe you when you tell me you've been here for 1 week. And maybe I can believe you when you tell me it's a little bit better 1 weekend. And then once I get to 1 week, okay, maybe now I can imagine 30 days. And at 30, maybe I can imagine 90. And so you're giving somebody something they can actually adopt versus giving somebody something that's so far beyond their ability to register that now they just feel like they're broken. It's going to cause unhelpful help the other way. And so we want to also offer opportunities for storytelling and Me Too in participant-centered care. So making sure that participants have a space to share stories. So a simple, practical way, what I do in my training groups is I put folks in groups of 3. I give them a homework assignment tomorrow. You're all going to need to come in with a 15-minute story. This story has to only have 2 things. 1, be honest. 2, include you. It can be anything. It could be a trip. It could be the dog. It could be the cat. It could be your wedding. I don't care what it is. I just need you to talk for 15 minutes uninterrupted. When the person finishes their story, I have the other two observers share the values they picked out in that person's story. Sounds like trust is something you value, a sense of adventure, honesty, family, blah, blah, blah. The amount of healing and Me Too that takes place when all three of those stories are shared one after the other, the availability for people to see each other on different levels, and also for people to feel understood in their own self in a different way. Oh, yeah. I forgot that I valued that. Oh, yeah, I can't believe you pulled that out in that story. Instead of it all being, let's sit in a 12-step recovery meeting and let's do the same. You're getting that therapeutic relationship. You're just opening it up in a way that might be more receptive for some folks. So they're being seen as not an addict, not a resident, not a client, not the new guy. It just lets people see people, human beings being human beings with other human beings. So we get rid of the categories that way. We also want to make sure that we leave room for joy, humor, play, and creativity. In all of my programming, I make sure that there are opportunities where we either do skits, where we do art-centered learning, right? Creativity is a huge aspect of recovery. In those creative spaces, you might not be able to talk about how you feel, but you can paint it. You might not be able to, practically apply these things, but you could first do them in a skit. And then even as the audience watching this skit, we're seeing it in real time and going, oh yeah, there is a better way to do that. And oh yeah, I've been there and done it sideways that way, which I don't want to continue doing. Joy, right? Joy is cultivated and humor is a resource. Right. So when we're thinking about resources, we want to keep in mind that resources are yes, detox, yes, treatment, yes, this clinician, yes. But the most powerful resources that we have to offer people are human resources, the resource of time. It's non-renewable. It is non-transferable. You can't trade for it. You can't buy more of it. We're all losing it. You give somebody genuine time and you get your community genuinely sharing time with each other instead of just riding this out, instead of just getting from point A to point B. It will feel different. Hope is a resource. Hope, the idea that tomorrow could be different than yesterday. Hope, the idea that tomorrow might be a little bit better than yesterday was. Hope is a resource. Hopelessness, the idea that tomorrow is going to suck just as bad as it's always been. I don't care what you've given me. You could give me a brochure stack this big and nothing's going to change. And so we need to think about joy and humor and laughter the same way, right? Laughter releases endorphins. Laughter is a statement to the body saying that you're safe, oxytocin. And so do we have groups where it's just the joke of the day? Right? Instead of all, the same recovery meeting groups, what about a group where we're gonna just laugh with each other? We're just gonna tell dad jokes. And so structure is also important when we're thinking about creating this space for safety. So, structure shows up in intentional group design. One of the big things that I suggest when I do my organizational leadership, when I go into facilities right off the bat, you need to create assigned seating. You need to immediately create assigned seating and you need to shuffle seating regularly, because if you don't, you are not harnessing the power of leadership that you have. Assigned seating is a permission slip. So I have folks work in tables of 5, 6. And in that table, those are your table mates for the day. They're going to shift tomorrow. They're going to shift tomorrow. And over the course of the week, everybody has now worked with each other once to some degree. It forces connection. It gives people a permission slip to engage with each other when they normally wouldn't. It breaks up cliques. It breaks up power dynamics, right? And so we need to think of the structure of our settings. So even when we're choosing how people are going to share, do you switch it up, or do you just always go in a clockwise formation? So everybody knows that I'm not going to share until the 13th position, so I'm not going to listen until then, right? So in having that structure, that setup, that facilitation of the intentional design of it all, you are going to get more engagement. You're going to get more retention. It's going to help in building that community. It's going to influence participant success. So again, referring back to those working agreements in this design, because now we can say, hey, the safe word is, or hey, we agreed to this. We also want consistency during change. There's a lot of change that happens in care. People are coming, people are going, people are leaving. There might be an unplanned exit as well. And so we might have town halls as part of our method of care. But what I would suggest is having town halls be something that's consistent. So whatever your information channel is, don't wait for it always to only come up when things are negative, because then your folks, one of the biggest feedback loops that I receive is that we're scared of town halls. We're scared of when the boss comes in. We're scared of when the leader comes in, because the only time they come in is to give us shit or to tell us when something's gone wrong, right? So the idea of town halls being consistently, or whatever your newsletter, whatever your method of information is, but make sure that it has positive, encouraging information. It has feedback loops in it. We want to make sure that all of the feedback that we're receiving, either through anonymous forms or surveys, that we're speaking to that we're letting folks know what it has been heard, what we're doing about it, what's happening now, what's a no, what's a maybe, instead of it just all floating up to the ceiling and everybody deciding for their own selves where that information went. So in these town halls, it's going to then create more feelings of safety, because they'll understand that information is being passed to them, that they don't have to make it up on their own. And so also, when we're looking at intentionality, we want participation to be mandatory, but we also want to create spaces for participation. So participation can be both active and passive. Let's say even in recreational activities, if we're going to have a soccer match, for example, with what's going on in the real world right now, we could have folks that want to play soccer. And okay, if you don't want to play, you have to come watch. And you're going to cheer, and you're going to pick a team, and you're going to pick a side, and you're going to, so that there's passive activity and active activity. And so that nobody can just say, oh, I don't want to play soccer, and they go off. No, you're part of this community. So you choose, still power choice, but you get to choose only the level, not if you're here. So that's, again, that intentionality. And so that can show up in all of our programming. Okay, so if you don't want to paint, do you want to be the person that sets everything up and helps people get new supplies and refill water when they need to, create systems so that there's 3 levels of engagement, from the pro level to the moderate to the absolutely terrified to be here level, so that everybody's still engaging, but nobody chooses to opt out. And so the impact of the environment, I hope you now kind of starting to see how in both individual and group dynamics, the things that are happening, behind the scenes that we might not be considering at all are actually the most impactful parts of participant engagement. And so, wanting to make sure that we understand that the room itself is already communicating before the facilitator walks into it, that the community itself, the underground, information is communicating what this facility is like and who the people are in it. And so we want to make sure that our chair arrangement, lighting, the distance, closed, open doors, we're thinking about religious symbols, political statements, logos, branding, all of that, and how or where it could be impacting this person. And so we can start to not answering questions for people, but being more willing to ask what this person needs in this space. And so, if we're going to boil all of this down, I would say, the big 3 there: power, choice, belonging. So power, choice, community. Just take those. If you're thinking about participant-centered, participant-led, how much power am I giving this person? How much choice am I giving this person? And what is the community telling this person? And so working backwards from those, you'll be able to, hopefully with some of the other stuff I've said, kind of take some of the restrictions out of care and make it more expansive. I'm just looking at the clock here. I could keep going, but I got to stop for questions. So we're going to leave it there.
Awesome. Well, Brian, that was great. I always love watching you speak. You have so much energy and you're so engaging. So thank you for sharing all of us with that, or sharing all of that with us. So we have about 10 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions that have come up, please drop it in the chat, or raise your hand now that we have some time. Like I mentioned, we will be sending through some materials to kind of summarize everything that Brian has touched on today. But maybe, as you guys kind of reflect and think of some questions to put in the chat, maybe I'll start with one question for you, Brian. We covered a lot of information and kind of a lot of levels. with participant-led programming and some of the concepts you mentioned. Beyond some of the follow-up materials that we are going to send out today, where could people go to, get some of the basics? Because I'm sure some of this comes with, time and experience and seeing what works and what empowers people. But if someone wanted to learn more after today's webinar and kind of really start to learn some of those practical strategies, where do you recommend that they could go to get some of that information and get their learning started?
Yeah, I would say in your own culture, making sure that you're going back to your own community and being willing to be the learner, not the knower. I think sometimes what's happened in recovery care is we've all had to, because of the scramble and the fight for budget and all. We're all the knower. We have to know, and everybody's got their own siloed lane of how they're caring for people. So a good starting point, I would say, just sitting down in your team and saying, what don't we know? Where might we be screwing things up, or what are we missing? And then the next space to go into is to ask your community, ask your members. They will tell you. If you give somebody this space to tell you, hey, where would this place feel more supportive? Where are we less supportive? What are your biggest fears? What are your needs? What are your wants? Have them tell you everything. You'll gain it there. Obviously, I mean, biasly, I can say the Recovery Training Institute, in the fall, you're going to see a whole bunch of, this style of learning. So recovery informed everything is going to be on there, so you can take those and learn online in that. But I would say the best starting point, in your own community, because then you're going to discover what your big ticket items are in your specific place, because each one is going to have its own adjustments needed. But using these as a base, and giving them the power to tell you, and then the power to listen.
Yeah, 100%. So with that, we do have a couple questions that have come in the chat. So Francis, recovery coach, asks, do you have any strategies for adding power and choice when it comes to mandatory programming? So for example, the mandatory morning meeting in a transitional housing program.
100%. Naming it, right? So we want to make sure that when there's the must-haves and the must-dos and the mandatory parts of things, we name it. So this is mandatory, and then we name the why. Why is this? So what's the intention behind this? And then we allow the person to share what their experience is with it, so that we can receive any feedback that's necessary to adjust on our end. Because, if we explain our intention, and it's a good intention and it's a positive thing and it's actually effective for care, there should be no reason why people don't want to engage in it. But if our intention is explained and then this person says, yeah, but that's not what happens in this morning meeting. People are checked out. Nobody wants to be here. Everybody just bitches, pardon my language, but that's how they might speak to us. That's really good information. We need to receive that, because they're not rejecting the mandatory part of the meeting. They're rejecting what happens in the meeting. And so understanding that nuance is going to make it so, again, power choice, using power, tell me what is, and then, pairing that with their responsibility of engagement, right? So there are going to be things that you signed up for by being in this program, by joining us at this facility. And this is one of those things that allows for the other activities to take place. And so giving them the power to help design it in a way that's going to be most effective for them, naming it and giving them the space to understand it completely in a way that they're not making up their own dialogue for why it's happening. I would say that would be how I would, when I'm working with folks, for example, I'll have folks that are mandated to be with me, they, through probation, through, criminal justice, whatever, and I'll just name it. So you have to be here. I get that. And so how would you like to use this space together that we have to make it the most effective for you? Because I understand how frustrating that might feel, being told that you have to sit across from somebody, and this person might not be wanting to talk. And so I'll say to them, okay, well, you don't want to talk to me? Totally fine. We'll take a time out. I'll go do my thing. You do yours for 10 minutes. You want some music? Can I get you some water? I really just roll with the resistance, to the point where I might just look at them after 20 minutes of not talking and say, like, have you ever seen a turtle ride a skateboard? And they're gonna be like, oh, excuse me? Like, seriously, have you ever seen a turtle ride a skateboard? I'll show them a video of this turtle getting on the skateboard and then chasing the cat and chasing the dog, and they're looking at me like I'm nuts. And I'm like, well, a little bit, but I'm just trying to show them that this doesn't have to be whatever version they think it's got to be. Yes, you have to be here, or you're mandated to be here, but we can use this space differently than you think it might have to be used. as a
No, that's
starting point,
awesome.
rolling with that resistance to
Mm-hmm.
build trust, to build connection, to build rapport, and then we'll go from there, right?
Mm-hmm. 100%. No, I love that. Um, and I think kind of, on that note of, making the space what it needs to be and things like that, Sarah Clunes in the chat has a great question that she's kind of asked to everyone, but I'll maybe, get your 2 cents on it as well. She asked, does anyone else have any examples of something in the room, a topic discussed, etc., that a participant has asked to be mindful of? Something like the blanket, I never would have thought of that. So are there any other examples of small things that we don't obviously think of that could be, sensitive or an area of sensitivity for participants that are a bit unexpected, perhaps?
Yeah, I would say the room is a big one, right? When we think about just our desk, right? So is our desk, are we between the desk and them? Has this created a barrier in all of our pictures and our stuff? And it's so nice. And then they're using a rickety little chair over there. What message is that sending, right? Where if we had a space where we've got, no power differential, but, and there's 3 chairs. Another example would be, at one of the support centers in Red Deer, they, after, going through one of the trainings, one of them raised their hand and said, that they got it now. They were like, oh my, it's so funny because they used to call this room, or they referred to it in the back as the interrogation room. So it had like one fluorescent light, barbed wire at the top, holding things back. And they were like, and we never, ever, ever considered why nobody would talk to us in there. And I was like, okay, so when you see it, you can't unsee it. So start, thinking about safety, not as something you give, but as something you ask to provide what this person's telling you they need, right? So in that space, if this person's coming from criminal justice and now this feels like an interrogation room and you're telling them it's private and confidential, yeah, right. They're not going to, their biology is telling them something different. So there's going to be disengagement. And yeah, so I don't know if anybody else, I can keep going. I'll shut up so I don't take all the time.
Awesome. Okay. And we have, maybe we'll kind of go through maybe do 1 or 2 more questions here. Angela Brooks is asking, may I ask for examples of creating meaningful engagement, perhaps beyond the mentorship option, if they are not interested in wanting to be around other people?
Yeah, so that's a really good space. So again, participant centered. So you don't want to, be engaged in other folks. You want a more individual process. Perfect. Would you be willing to write a letter to somebody on day 1? So then that person can read that. That could be a thing that you actually hand out, that this person, so that it's a private way for them to share their experience. So I'm here today on week 1, and you're arriving on day 1, and this is what day 1 felt for me, and this is what you need to think of. So they don't actually have to engage in a community sense or go beyond their means, but they still are given that opportunity to teach back. And that could be something really powerful for the next person that goes, I don't want to be involved in community. They can be given these letters maybe throughout their care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Okay, we have 4 more minutes. If there's any last questions in the chat, please pop them in. But actually, one that comes up for me, Brian, if you don't mind taking a couple more minutes as well, kind of thinking of the letters, and we talk about what you mentioned earlier with, being kind of bringing some of these ideas back to your team and being curious about it. But when it comes to, participants or people in care, how can you apply some of those things so that they also are aware of that when they're interacting with their groups, right? Like, for example, with the logos, let's say, if that's something that is sensitive for people, can you just tell someone, hey, don't wear your New York Yankees hat? Like, how do you kind of also empower the participants or the group to also keep those kinds of strategies in mind and not just staff?
Yeah, so we do an exercise called the Power Shuffle, and it really breaks that barrier down. And so I would say, as much as you can in your groups, getting that line of story to be shared so that everybody sees that common thread in experience, in story, because the assumption is going to be, I'm the only one that, nobody has had it this bad because, or there might be these preconceived ideas on who and what other people are, right? Because we just do that. We're biased to things, and we decide in a moment's notice that this person does this and this person is that. And so when you normalize this conversation, when you name it, and when you have a few community ahas, then the floodgates start to open, because then there's a freedom in it. People go, oh my God, I've been wanting to have this conversation for a really long time. Oh, me too, right? There's the world before Me Too and the world after Me Too. So the more times that you can get that experience in, where people feel safe enough to engage with this kind of conversation. So I never thought of it like that. Wow. Okay. And so once that starts happening, it's like popcorn, pop, 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 pop. People are, there's a freedom, there's a relief in it. And so I would say the biggest thing is normalizing and creating, again, that structure and that space so that these kind of conversations can happen where I'm not going to feel judged. Because the judgment and the criticism around being able to talk about being hurt or being scared, right? It can be a shame spiral for some folks. So we want to say, no, there's no, like, it's happening here. So, leadership might identify their own stories. Community and leadership can be leaders in the community or staff or whatever, but creating that space where we're going to set the tone, we're going to take the first step in vulnerability so that you all can follow our lead.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. Well, that brings us right kind of to the end of our time. Brian, thank you again for your energy and all the wisdom and everything that you have shared with us. This was a really great session. Thank you, everyone, for your participation, your wonderful questions. As I mentioned, we will have a recording of the session available after, and we will send out some slides and kind of some notes to everyone who has attended as well, kind of summarizing some of the things that we talked about. But as always, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. Send in an inquiry through our website, email us, and we will be announcing our next webinar shortly. So stay tuned for that. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everyone. Thank you again for your participation, and we will see you at the next one. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody. I hope that was good.
It was awesome, Brian. Thank you. All right. Cheers, everyone.